Most men operate under a fundamental misconception. They believe a woman's heart and respect are won through eloquence. They invest in long speeches, endless explanations, and a constant stream of reassurance, thinking this verbal currency will secure her loyalty. They confuse communication with concession and dialogue with defense. This approach, however, achieves the opposite of its intention. A woman's genuine respect is not constructed from the words you offer her. It is forged in the quiet strength of what you choose to withhold. The silence of a man who is grounded in his own purpose and self-worth resonates far louder than any well-rehearsed argument or pleading justification.
Wow.
This is because true respect is earned through demonstrated character, not negotiated through conversation. When you consciously refuse to explain yourself into the ground, when you decline to chase after affection or validation, and when you choose not to react to her provocations or tests, you perform a powerful act of disarmament. You strip her of the primary weapon she believes she holds in the dynamic, your attention and emotional energy. Her games, which are designed to elicit a specific reaction and thereby prove her influence, fall completely flat when they are met with a calm, unbothered presence. They simply cannot survive without the fuel of your response. This is why the most formidable and destructive power you possess is not anger, outrage, or plans of revenge. It is pure, strategic indifference. When a woman expects you to crack under pressure, to chase after her, or to desperately explain yourself, instead, you remain a portrait of composure. It shakes the very foundation of her expectations. Deep down, she knows that most men crumble, capitulate, and seek validation. The man who doesn't flinch, who remains unmoved, communicates a terrifying and attractive truth. His validation comes from within, and it cannot be shaken by external drama within the arena of relational dynamics. Most conflicts are fought with words, and this is a terrain where many women are naturally adept. They are often socialized to be communicators, negotiators, and interpreters of emotional nuance. Therefore, when a man engages on this verbal battlefield, he is often playing a game she is expertly designed to win. If you raise your voice in anger, she can twist your tone and use your aggression as proof of your instability.
Gosh.
If you enter into a detailed explanation, she can dissect your logic, find the slightest inconsistency, and use it to invalidate your entire position. If you succumb to chasing her after she withdraws, she can interpret your pursuit as desperation, using it to confirm her own perceived higher value in the relationship. In each of these scenarios, your energy, your words, your emotions, your actions becomes a tool she can use against you. It is tangible ammunition you have willingly handed over. Silence, however, is an entirely different language. It is a dialect she cannot speak, control, or weaponize. It possesses no tone to be misinterpreted, no logic to be picked apart, no desperate energy to be mocked. When you choose silence, you are not merely refusing to speak. You are speaking a wordless truth that is impervious to manipulation. This silence leaves her utterly alone with the one thing she may have been trying to avoid. Through all the manufactured drama, herself. There is no longer an argument to win, a point to counter, or a reaction to analyze. The conflict evaporates because you have removed yourself from the field. The only thing that remains is her own actions, her own emotions, and her own reflection. Staring back at her in the quiet. For someone who thrives on external emotional engagement, this internal confrontation is deeply uncomfortable, even unbearable. This strategic disengagement is not about petulantly ignoring her existence. It is the opposite. It is the powerful, palpable presence of a man who is so secure in his own frame that he feels no need to defend it with a constant stream of words. His calm, centered energy communicates a complete and unshakable thesis. It says without a single syllable, I cannot be shaken. I cannot be manipulated. I cannot be destroyed. This is not a message you are sending to her. It is a truth you are being, and its resonance is undeniable. This is the critical reframe that most men miss. Silence is not a void of weakness or a lack of something to say. It is the ultimate expression of control over your own impulses, your own need for validation, and your own emotional state. Any man can yell when provoked. It is a primal, knee-jerk reaction. Any man can argue when challenged. But it takes a man of profound inner discipline to feel the surge of emotion and consciously choose to transmute it into stillness. That conscious choice is what reveals true power. When you hold your frame in absolute silence, you are not hiding. You are demonstrating that your sense of self is so solid that her provocations simply do not register as a threat. You reveal in the most stark terms who truly holds the power, not the power over her, but the power over yourself. And in that self-mastery, you become an immovable object against which her unstoppable force simply dissipates. A fundamental psychological principle that most men fail to leverage is the human aversion to a vacuum. Silence is not merely an absence of sound, it is an active creation of empty space, a void of emotional feedback that is deeply unsettling. Women often socialize to be the emotional centers of relationships and accustomed to being the focus of a man's energy are particularly sensitive to this sudden withdrawal. When you cease explaining, justifying, and feeding her ego with your reactive energy, you force her into a position she is not prepared for. She must now fill that silence herself. Is deprived of your words to analyze and your reactions to play. Against, she is left with only her own thoughts, and her imagination is compelled to rush into the void. This is where your power becomes absolute, because her imagination will always be a far more potent and brutal interrogator than you could ever be. It will conjure scenarios, doubts, and questions far more extreme than any argument you might have made. She will wonder what you are thinking, why your validation has suddenly vanished, and whether her actions have permanently cost her your attention. This gnawing uncertainty is more destructive than any lecture because it systematically dismantles her sense of control. She can no longer predict your responses or anchor her emotional state in your energy. Leaving her mentally and emotionally adrift, this dynamic also serves as the clearest possible line between masculine and immature behavior. Boys operating from a place of insecurity and a need for validation argue. They explain themselves to a person who has already decided not to listen, mistakenly believing that more perfect logic or more heartfelt pleading will change her mind. They pour out their emotional reserves, hoping to be seen and understood. But in doing so, they only reveal their desperation and neediness. A man, in contrast, understands that respect is never won through debate. He does not try to convince. He demonstrates his principles through unwavering action. He does not beg for respect. He enforces boundaries by withdrawing his presence from those who fail to offer it. In this way, silence becomes the purest and most unambiguous form of boundary. By disengaging and pulling your attention back, you are communicating a non-negotiable truth without uttering a single word. This behavior does not deserve my energy. This is a boundary that is invincible. Words can be twisted, tone can be debated, and logic can be contested. But silence cannot be manipulated, spun, or argued against. It simply is. It is a final, unassailable statement that leaves her with nothing to push against except the consequences of her own actions, forcing a moment of genuine and unavoidable self-reflection. It is a critical error to interpret strategic silence as a passive or submissive act. On the contrary, it is the pinnacle of active dominance, representing a conscious, deliberate choice to refuse engagement on her terms. This is not about losing the battle, it is about changing the entire theater of war. The shift in power this creates is both profound and devastating to her strategy. In any interpersonal conflict, a universal law often applies. The person who speaks the most, explains the most, and justifies the most is usually the one who holds the least power. Their verbosity is a mask for insecurity, a desperate attempt to regain control through the sheer volume of their defense. But the man who can listen calmly to provocation and consciously choose not to offer a reactive response communicates a far more powerful, unspoken truth. I do not need to defend myself because your opinion does not define my reality. Realization is a blade that cuts deeper than any retaliatory insult, as it fundamentally challenges her perceived influence over your emotional state and self-worth. This power is compounded by the potent element of mystery. A woman who can perfectly predict a man's every response, his pleading, his anger, his explanations, will eventually lose respect, as predictability breeds familiarity and contempt. However, the man who remains composed and inscrutable becomes an enigma. He keeps her guessing, forcing her out of her comfort zone of control and into a state of reflection. The paradoxical rule of power dynamics is that the less you reveal of your emotional inner workings, the more authority you inherently hold, as mystery is intrinsically magnetic and commands attention. Furthermore, this disciplined silence serves as the ultimate teacher of a brutal lesson she is rarely forced to learn. Her value in your life is a privilege, not a guaranteed constant. Many women operate from an underlying assumption that a man will always chase, always explain, and always fight to keep her, regardless of her behavior. She believes her presence is the prize, and your persistent energy is the tax paid to keep it. But when you withdraw that energy and remain unbothered, you force a terrifying confrontation with reality. The illusion that she is the center of your universe shatters, replaced by the sobering understanding that this man could live without me. This thought is anathema to a mindset built on control. It introduces the chilling specter of indifference, which women fear far more than anger, because anger is still a form of engagement. Indifference, however, suggests irrelevance. Once she internalizes that she is an option to be evaluated rather than a foundation to be maintained, the entire dynamic irrevocably changes, placing the responsibility for her behavior squarely back on her own shoulders. The ultimate purpose of mastering silence is not, as it may seem, to dismantle her, but to achieve a supreme level of self-mastery and create the conditions for unvarnished truth to reveal itself. This practice is first and foremost a tool for your own clarity and refinement. In the quiet space you create by refusing to engage in reactive noise, you grant yourself the invaluable gift of perspective. This distance allows you to think with precision, to assess the situation and her character with unclouded judgment, and to make conscious decisions about who truly deserves a place in your life and your energy. This process sharpens your discernment to a razor's edge. You begin to see patterns of behavior and manipulation that were previously blurred by the emotional storm. Once you see this clearly, you cannot be fooled again. This internal fortitude, this conquest over your own impulses, is the most intimidating form of dominance a man can possess. It silently declares, "I do not need to overpower you. I have already conquered myself," a statement that resonates with undeniable authority. Outcome of this powerful silence is always a moment of revelation, serving as a perfect mirror held up to her character. A woman who is wrong for you, who operates through manipulation and a need for control, will find the reflection unbearable. With no reactive energy to fuel her, her games become meaningless. Her tactics will escalate in a frantic attempt to provoke you, and when met with continued calm, her true nature will be exposed in its entirety. Having no power to grab onto, she will often break down or walk away, revealing herself to be incompatible with your strength. Conversely, a woman with genuine loyalty and character, one who is right for you, will be humbled, not broken, by the same mirror. She will see the futility of her tests and the disrespect of her actions reflected back at her with stark clarity. This confrontation with her own behavior, absent your justifying noise, will compel her to self-correct and rise to meet the standard of your frame. You are freed from a toxic dynamic, or you gain a partner who truly respects you. This is how the war is ended, not by fighting, but by becoming a man of such immutable substance that he has no need to fight. You become an unshakable, undeniable, and ultimately untouchable force, not defined by another's opinion, but anchored in your own proven self-worth. The right woman will recognize this not as a threat, but as the greatest security she could ever know.